Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
Dad passed the potatoes to Rowan, not me, even though I asked first. Kendra was at the table for the first time, smiling, giving my folks her best story about a marketing class project. And Dad cut right through it to ask Rowan how many pitches he saw last weekend. Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel, said she was tired, and clicked on the television in the den loud enough to make conversation a chore. I felt that old heat in my chest, the one I got back in the bleachers when my name never got called. My name was Nolan. I was 29 and living outside Wichita when this part of my life started for real. I grew up in a small ranch house with a flat roof and a thermostat everyone fought over. From the start, I knew I wasn't the son Dad pictured. He kept box scores on the counter like scripture. I kept math worksheets in a folder he never opened. 4 years later, my brother Rowan showed up and hit everything over the fence. The family story got carved in stone quick. Rowan was special. I was steady. I learned to keep my head down and stop scanning the bleachers for a nod that never came. Quick note before we keep going. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. I met Kendra in February at a free tax clinic near Mid-State University. She walked in with a shoebox of receipts and a laugh that made people turn. I fixed her state return in under 15 minutes and printed out a clean refund. She said I made hard things easy, and I swear it felt like oxygen after a long hold-your-breath season. Her mom, Marla, ran a boutique and spoke like a person used to getting straight answers. Her dad, Doug, nodded more than he talked. On our first dinner at their place, Marla asked me about goals, certifications, and timelines, like I was up for a job. I didn't mind. I knew how to show up, sit straight, and give a plan. Kendra met my parents the next weekend. They were polite but distant. When Kendra tried to tell Mom about a campaign she was building, Dad pivoted to Rowan's spring travel ball schedule. 2 tournaments in Oklahoma City, he said, like he was reading stats off a trophy. I watched Kendra's smile stiffen. I just kept eating. Same dance as always, just now with a witness. We rented a 1-bedroom over on East Kellogg with a rickety balcony and a view of a billboard for a lawyer that never changed. The place smelled like old carpet and hope. We ate pasta 3 nights a week and split utilities to the dollar. It wasn't romantic, but it felt like building something that could stand. Kendra landed a junior role at a local agency. I took a staff accountant spot at a machine shop that paid on time and didn't waste words. We celebrated with takeout burgers and a secondhand couch that groaned when you sat wrong. Marla called to check in and asked about rings and timelines. "Don't let things drift," she said, sweet as a salesman. I heard the engine under the smile. I proposed on a Sunday in May with a small ring I could afford. $1,250, paid off over 4 months. We were on the balcony with 2 chipped mugs and a sky trying to storm. She cried, said yes, called her mom, then turned back to me and called me her safe place. Back then, safe sounded like the right word. We picked a backyard ceremony for June 14th, 2016, at her parents' place because it was cheaper and we could borrow folding chairs from church. Dad wore a tie like it personally offended him. Rowan gave a toast about me, out-kicking coverage, and slapped my back hard enough to make the cups bounce. Marla hugged me the way people hug after closing a deal. Doug shook my hand and said he was glad to have me in the family. The sun was hot, the vows were short, and for once nobody checked a scoreboard. On our wedding night, Kendra lay with her head on my shoulder and said she wanted kids. Not tomorrow, but not 10 years from now either. I said the same. I was 29. And I still thought time sat in my hands like a tool I knew how to use. I kissed her forehead, pulled her in, and turned out the light. The next year rolled like a train you couldn't slow down, and by the first week of September 2017, we were sitting across from a lender who liked my pay stubs and Kendra's commission checks. We closed on a starter place in Owasso for $212,000 with $18,500 down. The keys hit my palm, and I felt the weight of them like a promise and a dare at the same time. The house smelled like new paint and a plain, open future. The furnace kicked on and cleared its throat like a bus driver who'd been up since dawn. The living room carpet had the wrong shade of beige, the kitchen faucet dripped, and the back fence leaned left like it was tired of standing. We carried in boxes and a mattress and ate pizza off a moving blanket. Kendra slid her fingers under my shirt and said, "We did it." And I said, "Yeah," because I didn't have better words than that. Marla showed up the next afternoon with a green bean casserole and a wall calendar that still had the plastic sleeve on it. She put it on the counter like an agenda, pulled out a pen, and circled Thanksgiving at their place, Christmas Eve at their church, and family photos mid-October with a smile that felt like a rule book. Kendra hung it on the fridge without asking me where it should go. I held a box of pots and pans and kept my mouth shut. Married people showed up, smiled, and survived. That was the script I knew. In November, Kendra's sister Tessa walked in with a new guy named Chad. He wore cologne loud enough to arrive before he did, and kept his eyes on his phone more than on faces. He complimented the paint color like he was reading off a sales sheet and asked if I had beer. By New Year's, Chad was gone and Tessa was pregnant. Marla moved like a general with a supply line. Crib assembled in their guest room, diapers stacked in the hallway, a white noise machine that sounded like rain, and a lot of family sticks, the kind of phrase that sounds warm until you feel how tight it squeezes. When baby Mason came in August 2018, the house rang like a bell. People dropped their voices to whispers unless they were bragging. I learned to walk laps with a crying baby. While Tessa crashed on the couch and Marla made tea, nobody drank. One afternoon, I held Mason against my shoulder and paced the length of the hallway until his cries hiccuped down. Marla watched me the whole time and said, "You'll be wonderful when it's your turn." The words landed soft and heavy. I nodded and kept walking. We started trying in September 2018. At first, it was fun, the kind of new routine that felt like a secret between us. Then it got scheduled. Apps, alarms, kitchen timers like we were baking something. After a while, I was staring at the ceiling past midnight, irritated at a body that didn't always clock in when called. I blamed stress and told Kendra it would level out. She said she wasn't worried, but her eyes kept darting to the calendar stuck to our fridge like a referee. At work, my boss, Gerald, pulled me into his office and said he wanted me to lead an accounting software changeover. "More hours for a while," he said. "Same pay until we're through. Big upside after." He had the tone of a man who thought after solved everything. I said yes because the mortgage didn't ask how I felt when it showed up. I printed the project plan, highlighted half of it, and started living on coffee in the back seat of my truck between installs. A guy from church softball, Vince, brewed in his garage and had a smile that made you believe he'd pull it off. He asked if I wanted to invest $12,000 in his brewery dream. I laughed and told him the timing was rotten, which was true, and the risk was too much, which was also true. He said no hard feelings and poured me a pale ale that tasted like the first day over 70 degrees. I told him it was good. It was. By April 2019, Kendra's mood rose and fell with every late period and every negative test. Marla texted links that promised miracles in bottle form: fertility boosters, cleanses, shakes. She'd add, "just in case." Like that softened the shove. Doug came over with a box and installed a swing in our backyard, for some day. He whistled while he worked, asked me for a level, and then took a picture of it like a man checking off a list. I put in overtime like sandbags before a flood, and stopped noticing the sound of our furnace in the night. The calendar turned mean. Kendra would come out of the bathroom, set a stick down a little too hard on the counter, and breathe through her nose like she was holding back a scream. I'd ask if she was okay, and she'd say, "I'm fine," in a way that meant we were both anything but. I bought vitamins and read articles I didn't want to read and avoided the word problem like it could hear me. One night in June, we lay in bed with the box fan clicking in the window, and Kendra whispered, "I'm starting to worry. Should we talk to someone?" Her voice was small in a way I didn't hear from her often. I stared at the ceiling and thought about deadlines and the project schedule and how I'd already promised Gerald I'd push through July. After the July rush, I said, "We'll go." I swear she nodded, rolled onto her side, and pulled the sheet up like armor. I watched the fan spin and didn't move for a long time. The next morning I told myself it was a plan. The next week I tried to read up on clinics on my lunch break and closed the tabs when Gerald walked past. I hated how weak that made me feel and then hated myself for using the word. I ordered another set of cheap test strips off the internet and lined them up in a drawer like I was stocking parts. Labor Day hit hot and bright at Marla and Doug's place. The grill smoked, kids ran through sprinklers, and the adults parked in lawn chairs with paper plates sagging under chicken and potato salad. Marla held court near the cooler and told anyone who made the mistake of standing still that some people waited too long and missed their window. She didn't say our names. She didn't have to. Kendra's fingers found mine under the table and squeezed like she was bracing for impact. I smiled at my plate and chewed slow because that was all I could do without making a scene. Doug asked me if I could grab more ice from the garage fridge. I stood up before he finished the sentence. I walked inside, opened the squeaky door, and hauled 2 bags back to the yard. I dropped them by the cooler, picked up the tongs. Grease popped when I flipped the chicken, smoke curling up like a bad idea you couldn't unsay. Marla's little speech about missing your window hung over the yard while the sprinkler clicked and kids squealed. Kendra stood beside me at the grill, eyes on the tongs, hand squeezing mine under the table a minute earlier like a lifeline. When the last plate was scraped and the cooler was just melted ice and labels, we loaded the dishwasher in silent harmony. She dried her hands on a towel and said, low and even, "Let's call someone this week." I nodded because there wasn't anything left to hide behind. We met Dr. Harper in September. Her office smelled like sanitizer and lemon. She had kind eyes and a steady teacher voice, the kind that didn't let panic set the terms. Paperwork first, then blood work for both of us, an ultrasound for Kendra, and a plastic cup in a small room for me with a laminated instruction sheet taped to the wall. I did my part and stared at the painted cinder block like it might blink and tell me how to be a man who didn't feel like he was already failing. 2 weeks later, we sat in her exam room while the HVAC hummed. Dr. Harper spoke plain. Severe oligospermia, about 3 million per milliliter. Motility in the basement. A left-sided varicocele, maybe a hormonal piece, and she said stress could be kicking my ED in the teeth. She laid out a spectrum like a toolbox. Surgery, meds, intracytoplasmic sperm injection if we went the lab route. Donor, adoption. Her tone stayed even, like this was solvable, and we just had to pick a lane. I heard low count, bad swimmers, and rare, and after that my brain fuzzed like the cheap radio in my old Buick when you drove past power lines. Kendra stared at the floor and picked at a loose thread on her cuff. "What are the odds?" she asked. "What's the timeline? How much are we talking?" Dr. Harper gave ranges, percentages, what insurance would and wouldn't do, and what hope looked like without lying. I counted ceiling tiles because it kept me from losing it. That night, Kendra acted like we were fine through dinner, then took a long shower with the fan roaring, even though the mirror still fogged. I sat on the edge of the tub and apologized, like I'd broken a tool we needed for the job. "This isn't your fault," she said through steam. Her voice didn't sound like she believed it. I reached for her hand. She let me hold it, and then pulled away to reach for a towel. Sunday dinner at her parents' place. Marla waited until the dishes were stacked, and Kendra and Tessa slipped outside with baby Mason before she cornered me near the sink. "Men fix things," she said, quiet and sharp like a knife you only use for one purpose. "I expect you to fix this." Doug hid behind a sports page like a hostage note and didn't look up. I nodded because I didn't have a better move, and because my throat felt like sandpaper. I turned it into a project because that's what I knew how to do. Over the next months, I swallowed vitamins until the bottle rattled like a maraca. Did a trial of enclomiphene. Kept tadalafil for the days when things wouldn't cooperate. Cut beer, slept better. Walked loops around our block after dinner. I started a folder with receipts, lab slips, appointment cards, a spreadsheet that tried to make sense of a body that didn't care about tables. It felt like managing a changeover at work, except the deliverable was my dignity. Thanksgiving came, and Kendra held baby Mason for photos, her smile strained but camera-ready, while Marla told neighbors in her church group that we were working on it, with the same tone she used for a kitchen remodel. I carried pies, washed pans, and swallowed the urge to throw a plate when someone told us God had perfect timing like he was running a package route. I nodded and scraped a casserole dish until the baked-on cheese gave up. Gerald kept pushing hours. Big upside, he said, and I believed him because I needed to. The raise showed up in March, $2,600 a year. On paper, it looked like a jump. At the grocery store, it looked like 2 extra carts of basics spread over 12 months. I said yes to every shift, every Saturday, every "can you stay late?" And more nights than I want to admit, I fell asleep on the couch with a spreadsheet open and the TV flashing silent baseball highlights. January sucked the heat out of the house. One morning, I stood in the bathroom in front of the mirror with a mouthful of toothpaste and said out loud, "We could adopt." The word hovered there and didn't sting. It surprised me how right it sounded. That night, I told Kendra. "Maybe," she said, eyes on the floor. "I want one that looks like us first." Her voice didn't have any venom in it. It was just a preference dressed up as a rule. I didn't push because it was her face in the mirror too. Dr. Harper kept seeing us. More blood work. Another scan. "Counts can fluctuate," she said. "The surgery is an option. We don't promise miracles." She explained the varicocele repair like a mechanic who knew the difference between hope and hype. I booked a surgery consult for November and circled the date on the calendar. Kendra nodded and then stared at the little circle like it could move itself closer. By February, the calendar on our fridge had more doctor visits than barbecues. We had abbreviations for everything, SA, BW, U/S. Like codes would make it easier. I kept my folder updated and paid bills as they hit. A slow parade of co-pays and pharmacy receipts that we didn't talk about in front of anyone. In the evenings, Kendra spent more time at her parents' place helping Tessa with Mason. "He's cutting teeth," she'd say, dropping keys on the hook. "She needs an extra set of hands." I said okay because you don't argue with a crying baby you're not holding. At church one Sunday, a woman I barely knew rubbed Kendra's arm and told her to just relax. I watched Kendra's mouth go thin and her eyes get glassy. On the drive home, she said, "I'm tired." She didn't mean sleepy. She meant hollowed out. I could feel the air in the car getting heavier and said the only thing I had left. "We're moving." "It's not nothing." She looked out the window and didn't answer. I gripped the wheel like it might bolt. We had a follow-up with Dr. Harper in early March. She checked boxes, asked about side effects, and went over the next steps. "You're doing the right things," she said. "Let's keep our eye on the plan." On the way out, Kendra paused at the bulletin board with the new baby photos pinned up, a collage of wins. She put her finger on a name and then dropped her hand like it burned. In the parking lot, she climbed into the passenger seat and folded into herself. I started the truck and kept my mouth shut because anything I said would make it worse. Marla ramped up the links and the advice. "Cut dairy," she texted. "I read men shouldn't carry their phones in their front pockets," she said at dinner, watching me put my phone on the table like it was a loaded gun. Doug came by one Saturday with a tape measure and installed a second swing under our elm for when cousins come over. He patted my shoulder like we were teammates. "It'll work out," he said. I nodded and brought him a beer I didn't drink. He took a picture of the swings and sent it to the family group chat. Kendra didn't look at her phone. By April, our fridge looked like an appointment book. The dry erase pen squeaked as I wrote the next lab date. Kendra spent more afternoons at her parents' place, claiming errands and Tessa's list. When I asked how she was, she said, "Tired," in that voice that meant empty. I took the marker cap off with my teeth, wrote down the new time Dr. Harper wanted, and pressed the magnet flat over the card. I capped the marker with my teeth, pressed the magnet flat, and stood there a second longer than I needed to. A week later, the deck started to sag like a tired knee. Kendra noticed it first and said we couldn't have people over with a trip hazard. Before I could call a contractor, she called Rowan. He showed up with a tape measure, a grin, and that easy way cashiers love. He thumped the joists, pronounced the ledger board criminal, and promised to get us right. The first day of work, I stayed late at the shop because Gerald dumped a month-end mess on my desk. When I pulled into the driveway after dark, the porch light made dust float like snow, and I could see Kendra and Rowan on the steps with cold beers sweating in their hands. She laughed at something he said. He tipped the bottle at me and called, "We saved you one." I told myself it was fine. My brother was helping us. We were saving money. That's what families did when they weren't tearing each other down. Saturday turned into a Rowan show. "Rowan's got a truck," Kendra said, when I dragged a pile of warped boards to the trash. "Rowan knows a guy at the yard," she said, when I suggested we price out new lumber ourselves. It was 100 small comments that felt like paper cuts you don't notice until your hands hit lemon juice. I swallowed them and handed Rowan the crowbar when he asked for it. He slapped my shoulder and told me to hold the post straight. I held it until my fingers shook. By July, the deck sat level and solid, and Tessa begged Rowan to coach Mason's t-ball team because "you're so good with kids." He agreed before the sentence finished. Kendra went to every game to help. My phone pinged with photos from her Instagram, toddlers whiffing, orange slices in sticky hands, captions that screamed "family" with too many exclamation points. When I slipped over after work in my grease-stained polo and stood by the fence, somehow I was cropped off the edge of the frame. I told myself photos didn't matter. It still stung. At dinner one night, Marla watched me set plates and took a breath like she was about to be generous. "It's not that Nolan is bad," she told Kendra right in front of me. "He's just not functional in every way." She said it like she was reviewing a blender. Kendra stared at her napkin. Doug pretended the salt shaker needed adjusting. I kept eating and traced the wood grain with my eyes so I wouldn't break the fork in my hand. I hated that I stayed seated. I hated that I made it easy. I needed a place where sentences were allowed to be ugly without getting turned into prayer requests. I found a Tuesday men's group at the VFW hall, divorce guys, booze guys, layoff guys, all of us with chewed up edges. I sat quiet the first 2 meetings and listened to a man argue with his own breath. A big bald guy named Phil looked straight at me and said, "The thing that scares you is already happening." Say it out loud. The sentence landed like a shove I somehow needed. Back home, our neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, heard the deck story and offered his table saw if I wanted shelves in the garage. "Work with hands, you see progress," he said, patting the saw like an old dog. He showed me cuts and safe grips, and I filled a Saturday with plywood, sawdust, and a level. The smell cleaned my head better than any sermon. I slept hard that night. No dreams, no noise, just a body that knew it had done something right. Late August burned hot and mean. I came home from the shop, set my keys down, and told Kendra I needed a line drawn. "I'm getting worn down by all the comparisons," I said. "We have to pull back from your mom's place a little." Just a little. She crossed her arms like I'd told her to quit her job. "You don't get to dictate my support system," she said. "You're being controlling." We brushed our teeth without speaking and went to bed sideways and cold, both of us facing the edges like the floor might swallow us if we got too close. A week later, I stood in the hallway, half in shadow, and heard Kendra on speakerphone while she folded laundry. Marla's voice came through crisp. "You deserve a real family, honey." "You only get one life," Kendra didn't push back. She made a small noise that could have been agreement. I stared at the light switch by my hand and felt like a kid pressed against a wall during a fire drill. It's wild how small a grown man can feel in his own house. Sunday after church, Vince caught me in the parking lot and said he was doing a much smaller friends and family round for the brewery. "Don't laugh," he said. "We're talking $4,000 if you've got it, and I'll trade for grunt work on canning days if that helps." I thought about the deck, the photos, the calendar full of doctor visits, and the way my body felt after building shelves. "I can swing 4, I said, "and I'll stack cans, mop floors, whatever." He grinned like I'd given him a car. "I'll take sweatin' dollars in any mix," he said, and clapped me on the back. Dinner that night at Marla's was another performance. She asked Rowan to say grace like he was captain of a team, and then spent the meal adjusting the story so he was the hero of every paragraph. "Rowan knows a guy at the lumber yard," she said, even though I was the one who'd waited 2 hours for a delivery that never came. "Rowan's coaching so well," she said, while Kendra nodded and looked anywhere but at me. When she pushed dessert at me, she added, "Maybe skip the dairy, dear." I read something about men and hormones. I took the pie and ate every bite with a smile that hurt my face. That Tuesday, I told the VFW room what Phil had been waiting for. "My wife's mother calls me defective without the word," I said. "My brother is the comparison chart. I'm drowning in being almost enough." Heads nodded. Phil leaned forward. "Good," he said. "Now move." It wasn't wisdom, it was a command. I carried it out to the parking lot and into my truck. Mr. Alvarez loaned me the saw again, and we knocked out more shelves. He didn't ask questions. He pointed at my crooked line and said, "Measure twice, then let me fix it myself." That afternoon, I came inside with sawdust in my hair, showered, and stood in the kitchen when Kendra walked in, her cheeks windburned from sitting at the field. "How's Mason?" I asked. "He hit the tee," she said, like it was a real hit. I wanted to smile. I didn't have it in me. End of August, I tried again to set a boundary. "Let's skip this weekend at your parents'," I said. "We need a breather." She shook her head hard enough to move her ponytail. "I'm going," she said. "You can stay home if you want." That night she scrolled on her phone until midnight, and I lay there counting the seconds between the fan's clicks. The next week, she put Marla on speaker while she sorted laundry again. "You deserve a real family, honey. You only get one life," Marla said. Same tone, same cut. Kendra murmured something like assent. I stayed in the hall in my socks, holding a cold glass of water I didn't drink. I waited until the call ended and walked in. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Kendra kept folding. "Don't start," she said. "I'm tired." I set the glass down harder than I meant to. It sloshed. The night I signed the check to Vince, the house was too quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with the dull light over the sink and filled out $4,000 in slow handwriting. My name looked like someone else wrote it. I took a photo of the check for my records and stuck the stub behind a gas bill. Kendra texted that she was staying at her parents' because Tessa needed late help. I stared at the ceiling until my neck hurt, then opened my phone and checked flights to anywhere farther than this mess. I had a mortgage and a ring on my finger and 1,000 tiny anchors that didn't care how tired I was. I closed the browser on the airfare page, slid the phone into the nightstand, and turned off the lamp. By the first Tuesday of September 2019, I was trying to act normal. I swung by the strip mall on Maple after work and picked up Thai, Pad See Ew for Kendra, green curry for me, extra napkins because the sauce always ran. I pictured us on the couch with the TV talking over us, the kind of quiet where you lean into each other because everything else is loud. The house was dark when I pulled in. Her car was gone. I told myself she was at Tessa's again. Maybe Mason had a fever, or Tessa had a meltdown. I set the plastic bags on the counter and pulled out the cartons, steam fogging my glasses. My phone buzzed. An Instagram story from Tessa, the kind I usually swiped past. My thumb hovered and I almost let it go. Then I tapped. There it was, Kendra on Marla's couch, laughing into Rowan's shoulder like he was the only person in the room. Mason crawled over both of them, drooling, grabbing at Kendra's hair. The caption said, "My favorite people," with 3 heart emojis. I stood there with a wooden fork in my hand and felt my pulse climb into my throat. I'm not proud of how fast I drove. I tossed the food back in the fridge, grabbed my keys, and was out the door before the mental brakes even squeaked. The whole way to Marla's I heard blood in my ears and that high, dying buzz fluorescent lights make when nobody changes the bulb. I didn't pray. I didn't plan. I aimed for their street like I had a tow cable hooked to my bumper. The front door was unlocked because that was how they lived. Nothing bad could happen to them, not really. Voices drifted from the kitchen, clear and calm like they were planning a picnic. Marla said, "Rowan, you'd make a wonderful father," with a smile you could hear. Doug said, "Everyone deserves a chance at a full life," like he was reading off a greeting card. Kendra's voice came low and shaky. "He can't give me this." Then Marla said it. "Defective." She said it like she was reading a label on a blender she wanted to return. Soft, helpful, final. I walked in before the echo finished. Kendra's face went white. Rowan stood fast, hands half up like a kid who got caught pocketing candy in a store he could afford. Marla's smile didn't move for a second. Doug folded his paper and stared at his knees like they might write him a script. I asked one question. "What are we doing?" My voice came out flatter than I felt. Kendra cleared her throat and tried to make her face work. "Nolan, we were just talking," she said. "We're trying to be honest about the future." Marla's voice got steel under the sugar. "We are having an honest discussion," she said. "You're a good man, Nolan. But Kendra wants children. Time is moving." Rowan took a half step toward me and stopped. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, palms open like a man warding off a dog. This got complicated." "Complicated as a leaky pipe," I said. "This is a choice." I looked at Kendra. "You called him." "You came here," Kendra swallowed and nodded. "I have feelings," she said. "I want a family. I don't see how that happens with you unless we use a donor, and I don't want a baby that doesn't look like you." I felt the room tilt. "We have options," I said, slower than I meant to. "We've talked to doctor. Harper surgery. ICSI, adoption." "We're not out of moves," Marla cut in before Kendra could answer. "Options aren't guarantees," she said. "My daughter shouldn't have to live on maybe. She deserves certainty." Doug shifted in his chair and studied his shoes like they owed him money. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck. Kendra's hands twisted in her lap, the left one flashing the ring I'd spent 4 months paying off. I turned to Rowan. "You do construction. You know what a ledger is," I said. "You know you don't rip something out while a man is standing on it." He winced. "I shouldn't have been around so much," he said. "I didn't think—" "Yeah," I said. "You didn't." Kendra stood then, like her body couldn't handle sitting anymore. "I can't keep pretending," she said. "Every month I feel like I'm dying a little." "I don't want to hate you." "You don't get to make me the humane choice," I said. "You don't get to dress this up." Marla stepped closer like she might put a hand on my arm. "We all want what's best here," she said. "It doesn't have to be ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "You called me defective in your own kitchen. You did that." Her face tightened, but her voice stayed soft. I said what everyone was avoiding. It was a kindness, to be honest. "Kindness," I repeated. My mouth tasted like pennies. "Okay." Kendra's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. It was worse than crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I want a baby. I want my life to start." "It already started," I said. "You just don't like the story." Nobody spoke for a full beat. The refrigerator kicked on and the light above the sink buzzed. Somewhere in the living room, Mason knocked over a block and started a small war with himself about it. The normal sounds made the whole scene feel insane. Something shut off inside me right then, like a breaker flipped. The panic fell away and left a cold, clean quiet. I nodded once. "Okay," I said. "Okay." I walked out without slamming the door because I didn't need the noise. The night air felt like a warehouse. I drove home on automatic and parked crooked in the driveway. Inside, the fridge light hit the tie cartons lined up like a joke. I pulled out a duffel from the closet and started packing clothes I could find without thinking. Jeans, socks, the good shirts I wore to meetings, the flannel I stole from a lost and found in college. I grabbed my shaving kit, a pair of boots, and the folder with our insurance cards. I pulled a pen from the junk drawer and flipped over a water bill. On the back, I wrote in block letters, "File for divorce. I'll have my attorney contact yours." My handwriting looked like a stranger's. Too neat, too careful, like someone faking calm. I left the note on the kitchen table under the salt shaker so it wouldn't skate off. I took one last lap around the house like I was locking up after a shift. Bedroom, bathroom, light off, light off. I stood in the doorway for a second and then shut it behind me. The next morning, I was in the parking lot outside a law office with frosted glass before the receptionist flipped the sign to open. The lawyer's name was Carver. He wore a gray suit and a face that said he'd seen every kind of mess and stopped drawing cartoons about it. He flipped through a standard packet while I told him the 2-minute version. He scribbled a number on a pad. "Retainer is $3,900, he said. "Fast is clean. Clean is cheap. Cheap doesn't exist in family law." I laughed, short and mean, because it was the first true thing anyone had said to me all week. "Fine," I said. "Fast." He slid the card reader across the desk. I paid and watched the screen say, "Approved," like it was a test I'd passed. He gave me a list: accounts to freeze, documents to copy, passwords to change. He told me not to talk to anyone who wanted to make me feel small. "They will try," he said. "Decline the invitation." I walked out with a folder and a headache. In the truck, I texted Rowan. My thumbs didn't shake. "You two deserve each other," I wrote. I watched the 3 dots blink. Then his reply came back. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this." I stared at the sentence until it blurred. I deleted the thread, scrolled to the top of my messages, and deleted that too. My hands went cold. I put the phone in the glove box and shut it like I was closing a toolbox with a live wire inside. At home, I put the tie in the trash and tied the bag tight. I moved through the rooms quick, the way you move before you decide to quit halfway. I pulled a second duffel from under the bed and filled it with the things that would make me functional in a week. Charger, checkbook, socks, the hammer Mr. Alvarez loaned me last month and never asked back for. I wrote a text to Kendra and erased it. I wrote another and erased that too. My phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up the dark corner by the toaster. I didn't look at the name. I didn't need to hear their voices anymore. I picked it up, held the weight of it like it could tip me one way or the other, and then slid it into the drawer and pushed it shut. I pushed the drawer shut on the phone and sat on the edge of the bed like a man waiting for a verdict that already came. Sleep finally hit me in hard, dumb chunks. The next weeks turned into forms, signatures, and talking through a lawyer instead of a spouse. The divorce ran 5 months and felt like 18. We haggled over couches and cookware like we were dividing a small country. I kept the truck and my tools because I needed to move and fix things. She kept the dining set and the bed because those were the rooms she liked to perform in. We signed papers in a bland conference room with 2 witnesses who didn't look up from their pens. No tears, no speeches, nothing cinematic. I walked to the parking lot lighter and hollow, like the doctor had cut something out and forgot to stitch me shut. 2 months later, a cousin tagged me in a batch of photos from a vineyard outside Augusta. It took 3 swipes to get to the one that mattered. Kendra in white, Rowan in navy, Marla and Doug smiling like a bank commercial. I stared until my eyes hurt, then shut off my phone and ran. I didn't stop until my lungs seared and my legs wobbled. I bent over the curb and waited for the urge to throw up or cry. Neither came. The body saves you in dumb ways. I found a small duplex near Midtown. Creaky stairs, a front porch wide enough for 1 chair and an ashtray I didn't use. The living room had a slant that made the TV lean unless I shimmed it with a folded magazine. Mr. Alvarez knocked my first night with a pot of pozole and a plastic bag of limes. "Eat," he said, sliding it into my hands. "Don't talk." Just eat I did. Hot food you don't have to earn is mercy. Vince heard the story in fragments and didn't ask for more. He put me on weekend canning days. He paid in cash and cases and let me sweat in a warehouse where metal and hop smell wiped out every bad thought. "Summer Beer Fest might actually mean something if the judges aren't blind," he said, lining up bright cans like bullets. I lifted kegs, moved pallets, and slept like a man whose body finally got honest work again. In February 2020, I stood in the plumbing aisle at Brewer's Hardware, arguing with a faucet display that lied about being no drip, and a cart bumped mine. She had her hair in a knot, a list written in block letters on the side of her hand, and a stubborn look like she was winning a fight with a valve. "Sorry," I said, backing up my cart. She snorted at herself and shook her head. "I've been cussing at this display for 20 minutes, she said. "If a faucet could press charges, I'd be in trouble." I laughed because it was impossible not to. We both reached for the same compression kit and got tangled in elbows. "Take it," I said. "I'll test my luck on the other brand." She smiled and put it back in my cart anyway. "You look like a man who reads the instructions," she said. "That's who wins in plumbing." We walked out with the same bag of parts and a plan to get coffee at the place next door while the snow spit at the windows like the sky was mad for no good reason. Her name was Deanna. On our third date, she told me she had an 11-year-old son named Caleb and a custody schedule that didn't bend. She didn't list the days. She laid it out like an operating manual. "Tuesdays and alternate weekends," she said. "His dad and I don't do surprises." I told her the worst thing about me without dressing it up. "I deal with ED some days," I said. "Counts are trash. I've got doctor letters if you want proof." She took my hand across the table and squeezed. "I like you anyway," she said. "The rest is logistics." Hearing that made something unclench in my chest I didn't know was there. We went slow on purpose. Bowling on Thursdays where the ball hit the pocket or didn't, and no one kept moral score. Chili at Alvarez's on Sundays, when he made enough for 3 families and sent everyone home with containers. Text threads that sounded like 2 people talking, not testing each other for cracks. One night in August, she asked, hands tucked in the pocket of my hoodie, "Would you ever be open to being a stepdad?" I said yes before the fear showed up, then admitted I was scared of what I couldn't give. She nodded like I'd read a line right. "We'll choose what we have," she said. "We'll let go of the rest." Work stayed simple. I kept a few bookkeeping clients, stacked cans with Vince when he called, and learned what quiet felt like when it wasn't punishment. Mr. Alvarez filled the porch with plants and taught me when to water and when to ignore them. One evening, Deanna and Caleb came by with a small toolbox because Caleb wanted to fix the wobble in my porch chair. He held the screwdriver like it might bite. "Righty-tighty," I said. He smirked and said, "I know," then tightened the bolt until the wobble stopped. He grinned like he'd lit a fire on purpose. Kendra texted me once that spring. "We should talk." I didn't answer. Marla called from a blocked number twice. I sent it to voicemail and deleted the recordings without listening. No contact was the only boundary that held. When the grief rose like a bad tide, I drove to Vince's and lifted until my hands shook, or I found a wall to lean against in the cold room, and let the Freon hum rinse me out. In July, Vince handed me a crumpled flyer for the beer fest. "We made the list," he said. "Bring whoever you want." I brought Deanna and Caleb. We stood under a tent while college kids lined up for free samples and boasted about IBUS they didn't understand. Caleb asked smart questions about tanks and sanitation. Vince answered like he was recruiting him for a job that paid in sandwiches. We went home sunburned and sticky and happy for no big reason. Those are the days I trusted again. The divorce papers came back stamped and filed, not a word I wanted to read. I boxed up my last things from the old place with Kendra, while a moving truck idled out front. We didn't fight. We didn't hug. She handed me a sweater I forgot and said, "This is yours." Like I needed permission to leave with what was mine. "Take care," I said. She nodded and looked past me at the part of the wall where the dining hutch had been. I carried the box to the truck and didn't look back for traffic. I just went. By late August, Deanna and I sat on my floor eating takeout with our backs against the couch I bought off a guy named Brent, and she said, "This is good." I like this boring. I told her boring was underrated. She laughed and smacked my knee with the heel of her hand. "Don't insult it. Boring saved your life." She wasn't wrong. On September 12th, 2020, we got married at the courthouse. Caleb wore a clip-on tie he kept tugging because the metal bit caught his collar. Vince showed up as our witness in a shirt with his brewery's logo and a grin big enough to carry us. The judge read the words like he'd said them 200 times that morning. When he told me to repeat after him, I did, without ad-libbing. I was done freelancing my future. Outside, the air felt like the first day you believe summer might not punish you anymore. We walked 2 blocks to a place that only took cash and served enchiladas on plates hot enough to warn you. The waitress brought us a free flan for luck, and Deanna laughed and said, "I'm not superstitious, but I'll take dessert." Caleb poked his spoon into the caramel and left a perfect crater. Vince raised a water glass like it was champagne. To less drama and more flavor, he said. Deanna touched her glass to mine and said, to exactly that. There weren't speeches or calendars or anyone checking my numbers like a report card. There was a bill I paid in cash, a ring that didn't pinch, and a walk back to the car with a to-go container sweating through the bag. On the sidewalk, Deanna reached for my hand without asking, and I laced my fingers with hers and pushed open the restaurant door for the couple coming in behind us. We pushed open the door for the couple coming in and stepped into the evening like it belonged to us. Deanna's hand fit mine easy. 2 years before, Doctor, Harper had made a small cut in November and tied off a mess of veins that shouldn't have been where they were. She warned me not to hang hope on a calendar, and I didn't. I lived like a man who liked his girlfriend and his workbench. We bowled on Thursdays, ate chili on Sundays, and let the quiet be what it was, without turning it into a test. Back in April of that year, months before we signed anything at a courthouse, Deanna woke up green around the gills and blamed Alvarez's chili. She brushed her teeth twice, glared at the sink like it had insulted her, and tried to drink coffee she couldn't finish. A week later, she shoved a stick at me in the doorway of my tiny bathroom, her hands shaking so hard the plastic clicked against the tile. 2 lines. My mouth opened and nothing came out. First thought, it had to be wrong. Second thought, hope would break me if I moved too fast. Say something, she said, a half laugh trapped under the words. I want it to be true, I said. I just don't know what to do with my face. She cried and laughed at the same time and sat down on the edge of the tub. I knelt in front of her and pressed my forehead to her knee because that was the only prayer I had. We got in with Doctor. Ready, because Doctor. Harper's office was booked and Deanna's OB shared a hallway with her. Blood work first. Vitals. A nurse who called Deanna sweetheart, and meant it. Dr. Reddy walked in with a printout and a smile you could hear in her voice behind the mask. It happens, she said, eyes warm. Not often, but it happens. She talked about counts that wander more than textbooks allow, how surgery sometimes bumps things, how the body refuses to stay inside lines you draw for it. I said thank you like a prayer and a curse, because both fit. Deanna squeezed my fingers until they ached. In the parking lot, she leaned against the passenger door and let the sun hit her face for a full minute like she was charging. We don't tell anyone yet, she said. I want it to be ours. We told exactly 2 people. Mr. Alvarez, because he would have read it in my shoulders anyway, and Vince because he owns a fridge with room for emergency ginger ale. Alvarez made a quiet sign of the cross and said, eat oranges, as if citrus had a vote. Vince put a hand on my neck and said, you're going to be a good dad, which I didn't believe yet, but I didn't argue with. I built a crib like my life depended on the corners being tight. Alvarez rolled his table saw into my carport and taught me a safer rip cut than the one I was about to try. I measured twice until the tape squeaked and sanded until my hands went numb. I ran my palm over the rail until it felt like something you could sleep against without a splinter finding you. Deanna taped a sonogram to the fridge and started calling the blob Peanut, her voice getting lighter every time. Caleb wrote down a list of Big Brother jokes and practiced them on me until Deanna made him retire the ones about diapers and artillery. The doctor visits stacked up and I didn't mind. Every good heartbeat made another brick set. Some mornings I woke up expecting the floor to fall out from under us, and it didn't. I fixed leaky faucets, balanced ledgers for clients who paid on time, and pretended I wasn't counting days on the back of receipts in my pocket. When Deanna's ankles swelled, I rubbed them. When she couldn't sleep, we watched bad TV and made fun of commercials in whispers like teenagers. December came with sharp light and air that cut your throat if you breathed too deep. Bennett showed up on December 29th, 7 pounds and 4 ounces of human who didn't care what my numbers used to say. Labor went from jokes to focus to a small, efficient storm. The nurse said, "You're crowning," like someone announcing a bus at a station, and then he was there, furious and pink and loud. I couldn't hold anything inside. I walked out into the parking lot and put both hands on the hood of my truck and cried hard enough to fog the windshield. I went back in and cried in the chair next to Deanna's bed, then cried again in the shower where no one had to steady me. I didn't have a better way to thank anyone. Nights got short fast. Mornings were loud and early. My heart felt like a door I hadn't opened since I was a kid who wanted things without bargaining. ED still showed up some months like a rain that wouldn't move on, and Deanna would kiss my forehead and say, "We are fine. Go to sleep." She meant it. I believed her because the crib was right there, and because our life finally had weight that wasn't shame. January turned into a rhythm. Feedings, laundry, invoices, naps in 10-minute slices. I learned to answer emails with one hand and bounce a baby with the other. Caleb held Bennett like he was carrying a grenade he was fond of, and read out loud from the weather app like the forecast could calm him down. On Sundays, Alvarez set a bowl of pozole on our counter without taking off his hat and said, "Eat before anyone cries." He knew his audience. Vince called in late spring yelling so loud I had to hold the phone away. "We meddled," he said. "State fair, baby. Silver for the pale ale. We are finally on a board that isn't just the one I made with a Sharpie. My tiny 4,000 turned into a piece of paper that claimed it was worth 26 on a good day. I didn't buy a trophy shelf. I bought nicer diapers and scheduled the electric bill on autopay so I wouldn't miss one during a growth spurt. Kendra's name popped up on my phone twice that summer, and I let it roll to voicemail. I didn't need her voice in the house. Marla emailed a link to an article about miracle babies, like that was an apology under a different name. I didn't click. It wasn't for me. I was measuring formula and wiping counters with one hand. The people who named me in a kitchen didn't get to tour this one. Gerald called in July from the machine shop and tried to sell me on better pay if I came back to run a new system. "We miss your reliability," he said, like I was a forklift. "I can give you a number." I looked at Bennett asleep on my chest, mouth open, breath puffing against my shirt like tiny bellows. "I'm good," I said. "I've got my own clients. I like seeing my kid in daylight." There was a pause on his end like he'd called the wrong person. "If you change your mind," he said. "I won't," I said, and I didn't. In August, the Metal Mint distributors tried our beer without pretending they didn't need us. Vince handed me a check and a grin. "Don't frame it," he said. "Spend it on something that gets used up." I bought a used glider that didn't squeak and a baby monitor that didn't cut out when a plane flew over. Deanna laughed at my research pile and called me accountant dad, which somehow felt like a cape I could wear. There were nights the house sounded like a machine shop. Fans, humidifier, white noise, the dryer knocking because a button got loose, and I found it comforting. We lived in a loop that didn't grind. When ED drifted back in, Deanna would climb into my lap and kiss my cheek and say, "We're not a test." We'd watch the game muted and pass Bennett back and forth like a warm loaf of bread. I stopped bracing for judgment that never came. Every so often I checked the folder from Dr. Harper and Dr. Reddy, not to torture myself, but to make sure my memory wasn't making up a different past. The numbers were still the numbers. The surgery date was still circled in ugly red. The fact that anything worked didn't rewrite the chart. It rewrote my sense of what a chart was for. I put the folder back and picked up a half-finished mobile for the crib made out of thin wood and fishing line, and I sanded each tiny star until the edges dulled. The day Bennett rolled over for the first time, Caleb whooped loud enough to scare him, then apologized like a man who'd spilled a drink at a fancy table. "You did that," he told Bennett. "You did a whole flip." Deanna laughed and clapped, then smacked my arm when I reached for my phone too slow. "You're the historian," she said. "Earn your title." I shot the video and sent it to exactly 2 people, Alvarez and Vince. Both responded with too many exclamation points, which I let stand. By September, my roster of clients was just enough to pay bills without stealing weekends. I set a bassinet beside my desk and learned to type around a sleeping baby. The sound he made when he breathed, that slow, soft rhythm, made everything else sound like nonsense. I kept a burp cloth over my shoulder and a calculator under my palm and kept our small house humming. One afternoon, while the light came through the blinds like lines on graph paper, I laid Bennett on my chest and opened my laptop. I reconciled an account to the penny, double-checked the payables, and clicked Send on 3 invoices, while he snored into my shirt. Then I stood up slow and carried him to the crib. Bennett to the crib, laid him down, and smoothed the blanket like that could keep everything still. A couple Fridays later, we put on decent clothes and went to a steakhouse to celebrate Vince's medal and the new distribution deal. Caleb called it date night with protein and stayed next door with Mr. Alvarez, who swore he'd text if Bennett even sighed funny. We got a booth under warm lights, the kind that make everyone look like they slept well. The first bite of ribeye made my eyes close. Deanna reached for my hand and squeezed once like a signal we were good. I saw Kendra when I opened my eyes. She was tucked in a corner like a secret, hair shiny, smile dialed up, back arched like a billboard. She wasn't with Rowan. She was with a guy in a suit built to be noticed. His hand sat on her knee like it came with the chair. Her fingers went into his hair the way people do in movies when they forget the world exists. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. My jaw went tight enough to click. "Do you need to leave?" Deanna asked, voice low, thumb rubbing my knuckle. "No," I said. "I'm good." I took 3 photos, clean enough to see faces, not enough to wreck my night. We finished our steaks and split a slice of cheesecake because the waiter said we earned it. I kept my back to their corner and focused on Deanna's laugh and the way she stole my fries when she thought I wasn't looking. We paid, tipped heavy, and drove home to a baby who didn't care about adult mess, just warm milk and sleep and a clean onesie. Alvarez handed Bennett over like a football and said, "He burped like a gentleman." I thanked him and locked the door. Weeks later, we pushed Bennett's stroller through the farmer's market near my old neighborhood. Stalls lined up like parade floats, honey in mason jars, bread that cracked when you pressed it, tomatoes that smelled like July even in September. We were hunting peaches soft enough to bruise if you just looked at them. Deanna held up one and said, "This is the one," like she was picking a winning lottery ticket. That's when they appeared. Marla and Doug, moving like a matched set, with Kendra and Rowan walking tight beside them, and a toddler girl with curls and a pink bow riding high on Kendra's hip. We all froze. It felt like a fire alarm in a library. Marla started with the cold shoulder move, chin high, eyes sliding off me like I was a stranger in line. Then she spotted Bennett on my hip. Her face changed to something polite and hungry. "Who's this?" she asked, like we were a form she had to fill out. "My son," I said. "Bennett." I stayed steady and adjusted his hat. Kendra laughed, short and ugly, a sound with corners. "Please, we all know you can't." She stopped just shy of the word that would cost her the crowd. She tried again. "Which agency did you use?" Deanna's hand found my arm and anchored me. "No agency," I said. "He's mine." Rare doesn't mean never. Doug took a step forward like he'd discovered a new planet. "A grandson," he said, soft, testing the word like it might break. Marla reached out as if proximity could erase the last year. "Let me hold him," she said. "I'm his grandmother." I shifted back. "No," I said. "You don't get to throw me away and claim him." Her smile got small and sharp. "We were concerned for Kendra's future," she said. "We made hard choices." "That doesn't erase family. It erases access," I said. "You made your choice. Live with it." Kendra rolled her eyes, lips tight. "So you managed one," she said. "Congratulations. Some of us have real families." She bounced the toddler on her hip like a prop. I looked at Rowan. He studied the ground like it had answers. He opened his mouth and closed it again. "Nolan," he started, voice low. "This isn't—" "Don't," I said. "Not here." Deanna stepped half in front of me, calm as a stop sign. "We're getting peaches," she said. "Please move so we can pass." Kendra shifted her weight like she might block the aisle. "We've been praying for you," she added, syrup poured over a knife. "Save it," I said. Prayers that come with knives aren't prayers. They're threats. Doug cleared his throat, eyes flicking to Bennett, then to the toddler in Kendra's arms. "We would like to be part of his life," he said. "Whatever happened with us, he's my son," I said. "He's not a bridge back to your kitchen." Marla's mouth pinched. "You're being cruel," she said. "Think about what's best for the child." "What's best for him," I said, "is parents who weren't named defective in a room where I could hear it." People nearby pretended not to listen and failed. The peach vendor's hand paused over the scale. A busker down the row missed a chord and kept going. Bennett stirred, face wrinkling up, noise just starting in his chest. Deanna dug in her pocket and came out with the pacifier, quick and smooth. "Here you go, buddy," she said, popping it in. He latched and settled, breath leveling out against my shirt. She looked at Marla, not angry, just finished. "We're good," she said. "We don't need anything from you." Kendra hugged the toddler closer like I might grab her and run. "Enjoy your miracle," she said. "Try not to waste it." I shifted Bennett higher and stepped around them. "We won't," I said. "You can keep moving." Rowan's hand twitched like he wanted to reach for me and didn't. "Nolan," he said again, quieter. "Don't," I said without stopping. "We're done." Marla tried one more time, voice bright and false. "If you change your mind, our door is—" "I have my own door," I said. We walked past, the stroller wheels rattling over the cracked asphalt. The peach stall came into view, crates piled with gold and blush, the smell hitting like a memory that didn't hurt. Deanna let out a breath I didn't know she was holding and picked up a peach with both hands, thumb pressing for softness. "This one," she said again, and smiled at me like the sun found a gap in the tents. I shifted Bennett to the crook of my arm, reached into my wallet, and put cash in the vendor's palm. I handed over cash for the peaches, tucked the paper bag into the stroller basket, and we rolled away without looking back. I carried those steakhouse photos in my phone for a month. I didn't polish them or stare every day. I just let them sit like tools on a bench. Then I made a clean email, attached the 3 shots, titled it, "You Deserve to Know," and hit send to Rowan. No note, no speech, just timestamps and faces. 2 weeks later, Vince found me in the warehouse and said he'd seen Rowan at the gym looking wrecked, like a guy who couldn't figure out where the floor went. The grapevine did the rest. Rowan asked for a paternity test on the little girl, Ava. He got labs for himself, too. Turns out his counts were a disaster. He'd had a bad mumps case at 19 that never left him alone, and years of lifting supplements finished the job. The numbers came back basically at 0. Ava's test said what it said, not his. The steakhouse guy turned out to be a sales rep at Kendra's agency who dressed better than he thought and believed his own grin. Rowan packed a bag and gave Marla back the ring he'd bought with a small loan from Doug. Vince told me that part standing between pallets, hands in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. I didn't put any of that in motion. I just turned on a light. Marla called me 6 times in one day and left a long voicemail about forgiveness and family and the only grandson we have. Doug emailed asking for coffee to clear the air. I deleted both. Deanna watched me thumb the trash icon and said, "You sure?" I nodded. "I'm sure," I said, and I meant it. Kendra posted a long block of text about privacy during difficult times. Tessa liked it. People will like anything if you put it on a white background with the right font. I put my phone down, picked up Bennett, and took him to the park. We ran crooked races through grass so tall it tickled his ankles, and he laughed until he hiccuped and then laughed at the hiccups. That sound did more for my blood pressure than any sermon I'd heard. Rowan texted that night. "Can we talk?" it said. I stared at the screen and typed, "Behind Nelson Tire, tomorrow at 5, and hit send. It felt right to meet in a place where rubber met broken glass. He got there early and looked smaller. Hoodie, ball cap, eyes with a week of bad sleep in them. He stood with his back to the loading bay and didn't reach for a hug. "I'm sorry," he said. Not for the mess in general, for not being strong enough to stop what started. I leaned against my truck. You could have told her no, I said. You could have told Mom no too. He nodded, jaw working. I thought you'd hit me, he said. Part of me expected it. Part of me wanted it, just to get it over with. I don't have any punches left for you, I said. I used them all on the inside of my own ribs. He looked down at his shoes. The test, he said, voice thin. Ava, the numbers. It turns out I'm not... He swallowed the word. I should have shut my mouth a long time ago. Then shut it now, I said. Stop talking about what you should have done. Start doing what you can. He took a breath like it hurt. How did you breathe again? He asked. After that night. After they called you that. I keep feeling like I'm under something I can't lift. You pick up the first small thing, I said. Make a sandwich. Pay a bill. Fold a sock. Do it badly until it's done. Then you do the next one. You don't wait to feel like it. You work until the feeling shows up later. He let out a short laugh that surprised him. You always make it sound like a checklist, he said. It's a checklist, I said. That's how you get from one end of a day to the other. We stood there in the smell of rubber and oil while a train clacked somewhere beyond the trees. He stuck out his hand. I'm sorry, he said again. I don't know what else to say. That'll do, I said, and shook. His grip was softer than I remembered. We let go at the same time. He walked one way. I walked the other. Marla kept trying. Another voicemail that used my son's name like a battering ram. Another email from Doug with a subject line that read, Bridge. Deanna listened to exactly one message and hit delete herself. You're not wrong to protect the quiet, she said. I'll stand right here with you. I believed her because she'd already been standing there. That summer the brewery sponsored the street fair. We had a white tent with our logo and a row of taps that shone in the sun. I wore the blue shirt Vince ordered off the internet and poured pale ale into plastic cups until my wrist ached. Deanna chased Bennett between chalk drawings and a dog wearing sunglasses. Vince yelled over the music, "We might actually sell out," and grinned like a kid at a fireworks stand. Marla walked past once. Daylight made her look older, less polished. Her eyes landed on my son like she could will him closer by staring hard enough. She didn't stop. Neither did I. I pulled the tap and filled another cup. I pulled the tap and filled another cup, foam just kissing the rim, and handed it to a guy in sunglasses who said he loved the hops like he invented them. That was the last time I saw Marla's eyes slide past me like I was a smudge on a window. I wiped down the counter and kept moving. I'm older now, and when I tell this story, I try not to turn it into a movie. It wasn't a showdown. It was traffic, paperwork, and 1,000 small humiliations you either swallow or spit out. I swallowed too many. I don't do that anymore. People ask about forgiveness like it's a door you walk through once and the room smells better. For me, it was a fence I built at the edge of my yard. I knew where it was and why it was there. Some folks didn't come past it. That wasn't anger. That was the map. Deanna would see me pause at that fence and touch my back. It's there to help you, she'd say, not to trap you. She was right, and I kept it painted. I still had ED some months. We learned the dance, jokes, patience, the kind of touch that wasn't a test. If you're a man with numbers on a lab sheet that hurt like a punch, I'll tell you straight, you're not a busted engine. You're a person. Lose the shame. Keep the doctor. Take the pill when you need it. Throw the paper away when you don't. The bed isn't a scoreboard. It's a place to sleep, laugh, and be kind in the dark. Mr. Alvarez passed last winter. The porch light across from ours stayed off for 2 nights, and then his nephew knocked with a small box. Inside was his dad's hammer and a folded note that said, "Use this hard." I fixed a loose stair with it the next day and cried halfway through for no reason and every reason. Tools matter. People more. I hung the hammer on a nail by my workbench where I could see it when the world got loud. Vince's place hummed now. Tanks shiny, hoses coiled right, orders on clipboards that didn't get lost. I still owned a small slice and stacked cans next to 20-year-olds who thought beer invented friendship. Sometimes it did, for me. We sponsored a youth baseball team named the Owasso Bad Hops. Lime green shirts with a cartoon hop cone wearing a frown. I laughed every time those kids ran out of the dugout like the grass was on fire and they were the water. Home stayed simple in the best way. Deanna fell asleep with a paperback on her chest most nights, glasses still on, breathing steady. Caleb started trade school for HVAC and called me for advice he didn't need, just to hear the shape of an answer. Lefty-loosey unless it's union, he'd say, testing me. And I'd tell him to bring home a practice thermostat so we could wire it on the kitchen table. Bennett went to kindergarten all elbows and questions, hair sticking up like he'd argued with the pillow and lost. He looked nothing like a lab report. He looked like my kid. Every so often, Doug emailed asking for a photo for Marla, or Tessa forwarded a fundraiser link with a subject line that read family support. I didn't answer. It wasn't cruelty. It was accuracy. The people who sat in a kitchen and named me defective didn't get to rewrite my story now that it was working out. Deanna would glance at the screen and raise an eyebrow. I'd click archive and say, fence, and she'd nod and go back to underlining a sentence in her book. The day I sent those steakhouse photos to Rowan, I learned something I wish I'd known earlier. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to let the fire burn where it belongs and keep your house watered. You don't have to rescue every building. You don't have to stand in every smoke cloud. I had a house to keep. It was fine. It was full. That was enough for me and the people who slept under my roof. On a warm evening when the sky went the color of old nickels, I took Alvarez's hammer off the hook, checked the porch rail, and tapped a nail flush. Bennett yelled from the yard that his hopcone team needed a coach for pretend, and Deanna laughed from the steps with her book half closed. I set the hammer down on the railing, picked up the garden hose, and turned the water on low. Was cutting off Marla and Doug the right call, or should I let them meet Bennett? Leave your answer below. Subscribe for more.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.